We are still looking at text, and in this video we are going to look at positioning text, we're going to look at blocking text, and we're also going to look at giving your speech bubbles enough space so that they don't crowd the text within them. So this is more about composition principles and positioning than it is about Procreate, but you do need to use your Procreate tools to adjust things where necessary, and so that's why we're putting this whole thing into context. So in this video, blocking, positioning in terms of rule of thirds and white space, and then finally speech bubbles. Let's dive into it. First of all, blocking, and what do we mean by it? So often when you've got, say, a caption which is going to run underneath a cartoon, you might want it to line up with the entire width of your frame. So let's go and have a look at this text and look at what it might look like if we wanted to block it. So I'm going to stretch using my blue dots to get the text to pretty much run width across. You can see that I'm struggling a little bit with the middle spacing here, so that it runs kind of from one side to the other of the entire frame. And this is because as a design element, sometimes you want a piece of text to pretty much underline things. So if you put it like that, you can imagine it if we move the text right underneath, if the frame was a little bit further up and there was room for text at the bottom outside the frame, you could use that as a place for a caption if you don't want to use a speech bubble. Or sometimes it doesn't work. If you've got a long sentence or something, you can adjust the size of the text, but you can't easily fit it in a sort of paragraph form. So you might just want it as one long line, and it always looks better if you can line up end to end pretty much with the size of your frame. Now, what about using rule of thirds and white space? Let's have a look at that. I'm going to put the format of this text back like this so that it works better. And now I'm going to just tick in because I've actually filled in a rule of thirds grid so you can see it. And as you can see, we've got these four intersections, 1, 2, 3, 4. And in this particular cartoon, I selected it specially because it's got all that white space in the top half of the frame. So with the white space, what you want to do is probably position your text within the white space so that it doesn't have a lot of competition from drawing and color in the background. And then depending on whether you read left to right, so if you're working in English, as we are in this one, you're going to probably position it at the top left-hand intersection point. So let's go and say we're going to edit our text. We've got our text bubble, and we would probably position it like this. If I go in and untick my rule of thirds, you can see that brings the text down within the frame. It's got plenty of room around it, lots of breathing space, but it is positioned, we know scientifically, where someone's going to read it. And of course, if there were a reason why you needed to put it on the opposite side, you could certainly do that. So if we choose this and we move it across, here I wouldn't want to move it all the way across because I want to leave some breathing space between the end of the words and the punctuation and the edge of our black frame there. So let's have a look at the breathing space that we've got. And sure enough, that looks pretty good. So I would still be tempted to put it over to the left, but there might be a reason why you wanted it over to the right, and in which case, if you've got justification for it, go ahead. Now this idea of breathing space between a text element and, say, a frame such as the edge of this frame, or it could be a speech bubble or thought bubble, obviously is a brilliant segue to our next bit of work. So let's go and have a look at this layer, number 1. And you can see here I've got text within a speech bubble. And this is a really good example. I selected it because it's got beautiful breathing space. The speech bubble is a good shape. There's plenty of white space between the edge of the speech bubble and the edge of the text. Not so with the next example I'm going to show you. And if you look at this one feels just a little bit tight. Certainly between the edge of the speech bubble and that capital T, there's not a whole lot of breathing room. And if, like me, you find that drawing freehand speech bubbles can be a bit of a chore, so you like the size and shape of your speech bubble, but you really want a bit more room for your text to breathe, it's easy enough. We just use the select tool in its freehand mode, and in I go Moving very carefully between the edge of my text and the edge of the speech bubble, I select all my text like this, join back to my grey dot. Now I select the transform tool, go to one of the corner dots and just squeeze my text down a little bit. Then I can reposition it so it's still in the middle of my text bubble. And once I'm happy with this position, tap out of transform, and as you can see, so very much better, having a lot more breathing space around the edge of the text. So never let your text get too close to the edge of a frame. So that's all for this video. We have covered positioning your text in terms of rule of thirds and white space. We've looked at blocking your text, and we've also looked at adjusting the size of your text to fit in to your speech bubbles so that you never find your text is a bit too cramped by its restrictive boundaries. Now it's time for our next video.